Welcome to Makers Chat, a podcast community for creatives. I'm your host, Danielle Kaminsky, artist, maker, and educator from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Join me as we share our stories and explore the topics that are most important to creative entrepreneurs and makers. Do you have your ticket yet? The Makers and Shakers Small Business Conference is happening September 26th to 28th here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We cannot wait for you to join us to hear from all of the speakers that we have lined up. We're going to be talking all about what it takes to make this creative side hustle of yours a successful business. We have so much to learn from each other, and we can't wait to see you so that we can watch your business grow. Head on over to makersandshakersconference.com to grab your ticket and learn more now. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Makers Chat. I'm here today with Cammie Strunsee. Is this how you pronounce it? Am I pronouncing
how you pronounce it? Strunsee. Yep.
Awesome. So you guys, I met Cammie back in January when I went to market in Atlanta and I was looking for new handmade products for our store. And she does the most amazing work. So I'm excited to have her on here today to tell you a little bit about her and her business and her art. And she's just got some really cool things happening. I've been following you on Instagram. I love seeing all the things popping up about what's happening in your studio. So if you would take just a second and let everybody know who you are,
Sure.
What your business is, and where you are, and maybe how you got started, like, the thing that made you get started with the whole creative business.
Sure. My whole elevator pitch here.
Yeah. Perfect.
So, my name is Cammie Strunsee. I live in Sullivan, Wisconsin, which is home to the National Weather Center. That's like the only big thing that's out by us. Otherwise, it's the boonies. But my studio and gallery is in Wales, Wisconsin, which is closer to like civilization, I guess. And I just opened my studio in February. And I've slowly been curating like my work, but then also work of other artists that I've met along my creative journey that I've been on for the last 7 years. And I just want it to be a space where people can come show their work. And then I can also teach, because I teach what I do, because that was kind of like a unexpected bonus when I started doing this whole art business. It was kind of like, I just didn't say no to things when I started. I was just said yes, yes, yes to everything and just kind of saw what happened. So I've been teaching for 4 years now, and it's been awesome. And I get to meet all these different people. But anyway, that's a little bit about like where I'm currently at, but the lead up to that was quite the journey for that. So it really all started back in 2015 when I was, my children were small. I was doing creative things. So I would paint murals like in my kids' rooms to like brighten up their space. I did a couple things on the corporate level where I did murals to like brighten up a boardroom, office space, that kind of stuff. So I was doing that on the side to kind of, facilitate some extra income, but I could still be home with my kids because that was really important to my husband and I. So, but anyway, long story short, my grandfather ended up getting sick, and he was a huge inspiration in my life. He was a farmer. He worked really hard his entire life. Lots of good memories of being up on he was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So he had a big dairy farm. And like at one point, him and my grandma were like the dairy farmers of the year in Michigan. So it was their livelihood and their life. And, just lots of good memories. So when he got sick, it was just kind of sad to see this real robust, loud guy be kind of like stuck in a wheelchair and unable to do a lot of things for himself. So he was in a nursing home. I wanted to bring something happy to his space. So I painted this huge, I think it was like 3 feet by 5 feet portrait of calves, like little Holstein calves, to just kind of brighten up his space. And they represented his 3 daughters. They all had like little ear tags that had the year of their birth on it. So, but anyway, I saw how much it like lifted his spirits. And I was like, oh, this is really nice that I could do something for somebody and like actually have them, like, it really helped him, like just by having that. And I enjoyed that feeling of being able to give something to somebody. So I started doing some pet portraits because other people started, oh, you paint? I'm like, yes, I do. So I started doing all these pet portraits and stuff. And then my grandfather ended up passing away, and I was like super sad, obviously. So I would go on these walks and kind of think about him. And I had heard that, when somebody passes, like your angels come to you in different forms, like cardinals and dragonflies and butterflies. So I was like looking for all those symbols. And like I said, I live in the boonies, like in farmland. So I was expecting to see all these things all the time because hello, I live in the country.
Right.
But I wasn't seeing them. I was like, well, where the heck are these dragonflies and these butterflies? And I swore like prior to him passing, I saw cardinals all the time. And then when he passed, I didn't see any cardinals. I was like, what's going on? But I'd be on these hikes and I was finding feathers like everywhere. And I'd pick them up and I'd look at them and I'm like, oh, these are really pretty. And I bring them back home. And my husband was like, get those dirty things out of the house. This is gross. Yuck. And I was like, well, I really like them. I'm kind of obsessed right now. So I laid them all out. I cleaned them all up, but some of them were really gross, but I laid them all out, cleaned them up. And then I started drawing and painting feathers. And I was like, okay, I really like studying these. And then my dad is a very creative guy and he makes copper roofed birdhouses. And I was in his workshop and he had like this roll of copper. And I was like, hey, Dad, can I have some of this copper? And he's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So cut off some copper. And then I started cutting out different shapes and stuff and started playing around with it. And I was doing birds and leaves and flowers. And then I started getting on the feather thing. And I was like, oh, these feathers are fun. I'm having a great time making these. And, they started off very primitive. I mean, I'll show you, I have my very first feather I ever made. I have framed. My best friend did that for me. It's not great,
but it's cool.
It's cool, but it's not like, we're all always our own worst critic. So right. She forced this on me because she's like, you need to have this. And I was like, oh, I don't want to see like where I started. I just rather like have this. But anyway, so it started off very, very primitive and I was just having fun. And I, took to Instagram and I posted some of these copper feathers that I did. And immediately I got like all this response, like, oh, those are cool. Can I buy some? Can I do this and that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm like, I didn't even think about it. I was just posting stuff to post it, Yeah. And, once somebody's like, hey, can I buy that from you? It's like, oh, maybe I have something here. So I started incorporating them into my line that I would do at art fairs. And then quickly found out that people were really drawn to them. And it was one of those things where I had my story as to why I was making them because I was finding them. And I should say this. One of my friends came over prior to me doing these in art shows and had looked at my feather collection, which I now have like in a shadow box at my house. And she goes, well, she's like, do you know what feathers symbolize? And I was like, I have no idea. I'm like, I'm just finding them on my walks. I just think they're pretty. And she's like, well, there's a saying that a feather will appear when an angel is near. And I was like, this is what it is. So that connection kind of got me to the next part, which was then making them to put in art fairs. And then people would come in, I would share my story. A lot of times I wouldn't even share my story. People would just come in and then just start talking about what these feathers, like what a feather is symbolic to them. And it was one of those things where I was like, I made something that not only it drew somebody into me, but it made them happy or it made them feel comfort. And it was like, that's the whole point of like creating art is like you're communicating without words, and people are opening up that I don't even think sometimes people realize like how much they open up. And I'm like listening and just being kind of like, I don't know, maybe a conduit for their emotions to escape or whatever. So, which is kind of fitting because copper is a conduit. So it's a conductor. It's a conductor. So it's kind of strange like how that all happened. But I just became, I was just listening to a podcast actually earlier today about like obsession and creatives and how people get fixated on stuff and they just create and create and create. And, there's a line between what is like Malcolm Gladwell said that genius is or obsession is actually genius or something like that. I don't want to say that I'm a genius or anything, but there is something in it when you actually do obsess over something and apply it over and over and over again, you get better at it. Right. So doing what I did with the copper feathers, and here, this is what they look like now, which is obviously way better than that. They have more dimension now. My process is kind of streamlined and everything. So they do them in all different fits and finishes. But getting to that point where I was like, okay, I actually have something here and people are responding. I'm like, maybe I could build a business out of this.
Yeah.
And that's literally what I did for the last, 2015. I really started making the feathers in 2017. And that's kind of when it all took off. And then I made the jump to be like, okay, I was selling in little I can't talk, stores and shops throughout Wisconsin. And I was like, maybe I could take this to like the next level so I can really turn this into a viable art-based business for myself and my family. So that's what I did when I made the jump to go to Atlanta for the International Home and Gift Show, because they had a whole handmade category. And I was like, well, this is a way for me to meet people like you.
Yeah.
We're looking for something new and different because like our country is huge. We live in a big, big place. So I knew that there was a market for my art and an outlet for me to be creative, kind of live out I was a graphic designer for years. So, I didn't want to be stuck behind a computer. I really wanted to make stuff with my hands and be out there doing stuff and meeting people like you and others. And and then the teaching just kind of rolled into it. And
that's awesome.
So that's kind of my long-winded story.
No, it's not long-winded at all. And I love it because there's so many pieces of that I'm like, oh, that's me. Right? I mean, there's so many similarities, but I think that's the case with a lot of creatives, right? We start a thing just because we like it and we love to do it. And then it turns into this business. And so often it is about the connection. I don't do craft fairs as often as I used to, but craft fairs are awesome because you just, like you said, people walk in and they start talking to you and you get to learn their stories. And it just, I don't know, the connection as an artist, being able to sell your products like that is wonderful.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of creatives and a lot of artists, a lot of what we do is very insulated and we're like introverted. Yeah. I mean, there's days that go by where I'm just like in the studio making stuff and I don't talk to another person.
Yeah.
Like by myself.
To do.
Yeah. And I love people. I love being around people. But I love the quiet that comes with creating too. But you have to have that balance of like being able to have your own quiet time to like, because there's a lot of reflection and I think like meditation that comes in when you're getting a project together or trying to figure out how to do something or make something new. It's a lot of quiet time that you need to focus. But then, with everything, you also need other people to talk to and kind of play off of them and listen to what they have to say too. So yeah,
and I'm sure, is it your experience? Because I feel like it's kind of been mine, at least, when you're teaching classes, the conversations you're having with the people who are creating, and they're like, oh, you could do this. Oh, you could do this. It's like, you get some really good ideas just having conversations with people about, right. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's always fun for me, is to hear the feedback from the people in class. And they're like, could I do this on this, or use this for this medium or whatever? Yeah. And it's like,
I never thought of that, but let's try it. Yeah, that's one of the things that I try to tell people too, like, because I think as a society, we kind of function in like these little constraints where, and even like schooling and stuff, you're not really allowed to go out of the box so much. You kind of have to stay within like this little like area. So when you're actually like, are listening to people and they're saying, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? A lot of people are like, well, I'm not even going to try it, or I don't want to mess it up, or, but it's that point of like, well, what would happen if we tried that? Let's find out, what's the worst that's going to happen? Yeah. We got to scrap a project and stick it in the oh no pile. Yeah. Or you could like try it and see what happens. Maybe it's a great success. Maybe it's an epic fail, it's going to be cool either way. You're going to learn something. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your studio, because like you said, that is new for you, having a studio space with other people. What does that look like? Who's in there with you?
So fortunately my dad he's retired now. So he's like my main guy. So like we do all of our, the feathers are mounted on wood boards. I have butterflies and dragonflies that are also mounted on wood. So we have like a lot of dust and lumber and stuff in the back of the studio. So it's a really nice woodworking shop. So we create things back there. So my dad is here helping me a lot. My husband helps out a lot. I do have some artists that have been with me for a while that I utilize for piecework. So I've trained them on my methods that I have for like on my feathers and butterflies and dragonflies and stuff. So I will give them piecework. I did for a while. I tried out having like a permanent assistant here, and running a small business. It really comes down to like what you can afford and what you can. And it's this is new for me as far as like having an actual physical space that's all just business. Because prior to this, I was in my garage in my house and no overhead. So transitioning to this it's been a great experience. It's been a learning experience, but it's been very like, okay, I got to be smart about things and really kind of focus my efforts where I'm going to see the most growth and the most bang for my buck, so to speak. So
Right.
yeah, I do have piece workers. Like I said, my dad is pretty much like the cheapest labor imaginable because he's like sweat equity investment into this.
Yes.
So, but yeah, it's really, I mean, kind of mostly me, just doing the day-to-day thing. My kids come in here, they're 15 and 11. So like on the weekends, they'll run like the storefront and,
That's
check
fun.
people out and stuff like that. So it's really like a family run kind of business, which has been pleasantly surprising and fun.
I love that. Did you have anyone in your family growing up that had their own businesses or anything like that for you to be?
I'm trying to think. Not that I was directly like in contact with. I know like my great grandfather had like a bakery at one point. So he did that kind of stuff, but I never met him, so I never really knew. But I know like as a kid, I remember my sister and I used to play downstairs in the basement and like we would play store and
Yes.
we would like put stuff up. So I kind of always had it in the back of my mind
Yeah.
as to being that. And like when I started the creative side of this business, it was like, well, maybe someday I'll have a shop. And it was just like for me growing and selling what I have, like my wholesaling accounts has gotten me to this point where I could be like, okay, my next logical step
Yeah.
is to have a shop where people can, because I would have people messaging me on Facebook, or Etsy got out of control for a while. And I was like, I can't juggle all these things. I
All the
have to
things.
have, yeah, like I have to like funnel all my efforts into one. So yeah, it just made like sense to have a store here. And it's been so far so good. So
Awesome. That's awesome.
yeah.
I was asking because I know I'm sure your kids are just going to love that though. They're going to look back on that and just love that time in your studio, because I remember growing up, I had two grandparents on each, like one on each side of the family, that owned their own businesses.
Yeah.
And we got to go as kids and like spend the day there and help and do the different little things and whatnot.
Yeah.
And like, when I was younger, I wouldn't have told you that I wanted a store. Like that wasn't necessarily what I wanted, but
Right.
like, as I've opened my store and gotten back into it, it's like the things that I remember enjoying when I was a kid are still the things that I really enjoy about it.
Right.
And whether they go that direction or not, it was really great memories to be able to spend that time with family in that kind of setting. So I know that
Yeah.
they'll
Yeah.
love
I'm hoping
that.
my kids like see that because then they come in here and I'm like, I'll sweep the floors, go clean the bathrooms. And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, mom. Like, well, this is stuff that has to be done, but
right.
it is good. And it is one of those like kind of like character building
Yeah.
exercises for them and for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been really good. So
That's awesome. I love it. So tell me about some of the classes. I've been, like I said, I've been watching on Instagram when you've been posting different things, and it looks like y'all are having a blast. How
oh
do you
yes.
decide what kind of class? Because I would imagine, well, I can tell with what you're doing, there's like so many steps. It's a big process. It's
Yes.
probably not super easy
No.
to bring to a classroom.
Right. And that was one of the things that really, because like I said, I've been teaching for 4 years. So for 4 years, I had a suitcase, like two suitcases full of supplies. And I would be invited by different studios and little shops in Wisconsin. Hey, come teach a class here. And I was all about supporting small business because I know how difficult it is, and like to get bodies into a place to see. So I would, I have my own, like, whatever, social media following and stuff, and they have their social media following. So if you put those two together, you're really kind of expanding everything. So they help me, I help them. But it just got to the point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I am traveling every weekend. I was really putting in the hours and the effort to grow that side of my business, and just like, hey, I'm here, and I mean, where I'm at in Wisconsin is the southeastern portion of Wisconsin, but I was all the way up in like northwestern Wisconsin. I was in Illinois. I went to Michigan a few times. I mean, I was all over. And, getting that kind of portion of it, like, I have everything here, and I don't have to have like a panic attack when I'm on the road going, oh my God, did I forget the glue or whatever, so that putting in the hours that way kind of like helped me figure out how I can best run a class where it's you get a lot in a relatively small period of time. So like most of my copper classes run anywhere from like 2 to 3 hours, depending on what we're creating and what we're doing. And for me, it's really important to have that teaching element where I'm educating people on the metal, for one, because I mean, copper, how many people like work with copper on a regular basis? Not many. So like having them like be like familiar with it is important. And then not only being familiar with it, but then being comfortable working with it. I don't work on a super heavy gauge copper, so it's really easily, you can manipulate it pretty easily with simple tools. So like figuring that all out and just being able to kind of condense everything, because usually when I come up with a workshop idea, I'm like, okay, how long did this take me to do? And then like the average person who doesn't do this all the time, sometimes I take for granted, anytime you focus a lot on something, you're going to be adept to doing it a little bit quicker than somebody who doesn't. It's like trying to teach me how to play basketball would be like, it would take me way too long. I suck at sports, So, I mean, that would take me the longest time ever to like figure out how to do like a layup and, whatever, shoot baskets, that kind of thing. So there's that time buffer that I have to like figure in. Okay, so this takes me, 20 minutes to do, but the average person who doesn't do this on a daily basis, maybe it takes them an hour. So you have to figure in that time so that they're not feeling rushed, they're comfortable, they're also having an experience. So they need to be relaxed about it. So you can't rush everything through. So, developing classes that way is kind of fun. I mean, the stuff that I do, a lot of it just comes from stuff that I'm like, what do I want to make? Because if I want to make it, maybe somebody else is going to want to make it. So yeah, we do the feather classes. We have butterflies and dragonflies. I do copper foliage, like flowers and leaves. We have a new class here. I'll show you this one. This new class is coming up. This is the oak leaf. Yeah, and it's on a copper board that we patinaed, and then I'm going to show people how to do the forming of the leaf, and then we do heat oxidation, and then we make the little acorns there. So it's pretty stuff. I love pretty things. So like, and then the end result of it and everything is kind of fun. But then, like I said, I have other artists in here that are also creative, and they also love to teach. So the latest workshop that we just did here was a fedora and feather workshop. And a couple years ago, I had met this woman. Her name is Paula, at a Harley Davidson rally in Oconomowoc, which is not that far from us. And I was walking around looking at all the stuff at this rally, and she had this cool booth and all these really awesome clothes, like kind of rock star clothes, sort of like rock and roll meets biker meets boho. It was really cool. And I like went up to her, I'm like, hey, your stuff is awesome. Like, what do you do? Like, what is this? And she's like, well, it's all repurposed clothing that I just add my own spin to. So she would like, add studs and furs or laces. And anyway, I just fell in love with her overall aesthetic. And when I opened the shop, she was one of the first people that popped in my head. I'm like, I need to have her here. because her stuff is really cool. So she came in and we just hit it off like immediately. And we were talking, she makes these really cool like hats, like gambler hats, fedoras, so on and so forth. And she was like, would it be cool if we did like a hat workshop? And I was like, that would be cool. I'm like, and then I can make a copper feather. We can stick the copper feathers in the hats and, kind
Yes.
of embellish them. So we put that all together and we had about 10 people that came to that class. And that was a good 4 hours that we
Yeah.
spent making hats. And it was just a fun time for everyone. And just, two people coming together and like, let's create this together and then kind of just throw it out there and see what sticks. And
Yeah.
we've had a good response for that. So we're probably gonna be doing that again in the fall. But yeah, all the workshops, it's really for me stuff that I want to make, but then also talking to other creatives to see if I could be a place for them to come and teach
Yeah.
their stuff, So like my alcohol ink artist, her name is Beth Kluth. She's great. She's actually teaching 2 classes here this week. I've met a potter who's doing glass fusing and pottery. It's just all about these connections you make with all these different creatives, and you
Yeah.
never really know who or what is going to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, like having the workshops here, it's a great way for me to just kind of expand my practice, because when you teach, you learn
Mm-hmm.
as you go. And there's certain things that I've learned by teaching that I'm like kind of grateful for that I have that. But then, like you said, having people come in and like make suggestions and like, let's do this, let's do that. So it's kind of like a necessary thing, I guess, for me to have the workshops. But yeah, we have a lot coming up. And then next, like, well, I have my summer schedule released and I'm just trying to do stuff that I love.
Yeah.
And if people love to do it with me, that's that's great. And that's
Exactly.
the whole point. So yeah, and it's just about putting myself out there. Definitely making myself uncomfortable is another thing. Like I know when I'm like kind of on the brink of making that next step is when I feel like the most hesitant to do it. So I'm like, well, we're just going to keep going, plow forward and see what happens. So yeah, we have a couple table workshops that we're going to be doing. Never thought I'd get into furniture, but here we are.
Fun. That would be a lot of fun. I love
Yeah.
it. That's so great. Yeah, I do. I love your work. It's beautiful. So when did you start adding the meaning? Like, so one of the things that I love and the customers here have really enjoyed is being able to buy your little what would you call it? Like a little word plate that has the sayings for the feathers.
Yeah.
When did you start adding that?
That was actually immediate because like I said, when people would come into my art show booth, for me, it was the angels, but I would have other people that were like, oh, no. I found this because I was like like some of the sadder stories, like I was going through a divorce and I saw this feather on the ground or it was floating and I knew that everything was going to be okay. So it meant like resilience to that person. And then I'm a huge nerd when it comes to like researching stuff. And symbology I've always liked symbology, but I really got into it when I started doing more artwork stuff. And then just finding out that, feathers specifically, I mean, there's birds all over the world.
Yeah,
So every culture is there's something in every culture that feathers mean certain things to certain cultures and everything, which I was just like, well, that's a fascinating psychology of like the human condition. Like we're all here and we're applying meaning to things, and depending on where you're from or what you're growing up with, it means different things to different people. So the meanings, I was like, I wanted people to be able to choose their own meaning for their piece, so they could have like their own one of a kind, unique piece, because every feather is totally different. We don't like repeat or use stamps or dyes or anything like that. So it was important to me that people have their own one of a kind piece, but then they can also add that extra element where they have the word plate where they can really make it their own. And then it's like it's meant for them. So that's kind of how that got started. And then like the dragonflies and the butterflies, again with the symbology. Butterflies are about metamorphosis and change. And one of the word plates is don't quit before miracles happen. And that was like, when I was thinking about that, I'm like, oh, that is so true. Because just think about that caterpillar, turning itself into like sludge. And if it
Yeah.
were to quit, before it actually changed, we wouldn't have these beautiful butterflies. So
Yeah.
it's that kind of that thought behind it that for me really kind of means something to me. And then to be able to share that with others, I think, and then to have them respond in a positive way, mostly positive. I haven't had anybody like go, this sucks. So
No one's going to.
I hope not. But yeah, that it was, like I said, it was important to me that everybody has their own like grasp on it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love it so much. We've had a lot of response here. Same like you're saying, people walk in and it's like, oh, this is cool. And they have their different reasons and different stories of why they love the things. So
Right.
we had this big butterfly display. So I met you in January and I was like, we have a lot of vendors in our store. So we don't buy a whole lot of products for the store, but
Sure.
when we do, we want it to be special, handmade. If we don't have
Right.
somebody locally doing, like we didn't have anybody doing copper work, so that was perfect.
Mhm.
So like, but then to bring it in and you have your little art cards that
Mhm.
you have with your pieces. So like people can look at your work and they have the card and they're complimenting you as the artist. And it's a lot more personal. It's a much more
Yeah.
personal touch. They know that there's an individual making these with the thought process. And
Right.
again, that opens that door, like you're saying, for the conversation that then it's
Mhm.
like, I love butterflies, and they'll start telling you why they love butterflies, or
Yeah.
I love dragonflies, or whatever the story is. But
Yeah.
it's always fun when you make them and send them, you put the sticky on the back. But I asked
Yes.
you because you had someone else that hammered them on,
Yeah.
and I was like, I want to do that, I want to hammer it onto the piece, so give me the little things.
Right.
So it's always kind of fun because it's the process, and they're like, they buy it and then we put it together for them.
Right.
And usually go ahead and gift wrap it. And it's like that extra personal, I guess, element where
Yeah.
you really get to have the conversation because you're
Mhm.
talking while you have that whole process. It's not just
Yeah.
picking something up off a shelf. So I
Yeah.
really love that piece of what you do, that it's not
Good.
only them applying their own meaning to the feather, but creating like a personal connection in the process, because it is a
Mhm.
process.
Yeah, it
So it
is.
takes, a little bit more time. So anyway, it's awesome. So
Thanks. Yeah, that means, and it's so nice to hear that too, because when I'm sitting here making these things and like, because all the word plates, like I hand stamp all of those, so letter by letter.
Yep.
I'm touching every piece, constantly. So like when it goes off and I don't see it again, and I don't have that, like, you are the retailer and you have your customer experience. Like I don't get to see that. So it's nice to hear that, hey, we too are experiencing that same type of thing, which is, that to me means a lot, that I'm like, okay, people are getting it. Because when you live in this a fast paced, everything is like consumable and replaceable and this and that, like to actually like kind of slow down and appreciate, and then go, oh yeah, this is an actual thing that an actual person made with their actual hands, and not
Yeah.
like just on an assembly line. That to me, I think is big, and the people that get it, they really get it, and that's cool. That's a really cool experience.
Yeah,
So I'm
it
glad
is.
you
It's
have that.
really awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
Let's do some of our fun rapid fire questions for just a minute and
Okay.
kind of get to know you that way.
Sure.
Are you beach or mountains?
Oh God. Beach with mountains.
I love it.
Yeah.
Maybe more lake or Hawaii. Okay, there you go. That's
Hawaii,
perfect.
or like Rocky Mountain with a lake. Yes.
Yes.
I have to have it all.
So both. That's the first time I've gotten that answer.
I love it. I love it. I love it all.
Are you a book reader or a movie watcher?
Oh, books.
Books.
Yeah.
Do you like to listen to your books, or do you like to read like a physical copy?
When I'm working, because I have that extra time to like listen, I have tons of audiobooks. So I go through those like they're candy. Yeah. But when I do like on vacation, I always bring an actual physical book to read, because there's nothing better than that. So
yeah, that's definitely very true.
yeah.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee.
All day. I need my crazy caffeine. Yeah, all day. I probably shouldn't, but
I'm the same way.
way.
How do you drink your coffee?
I like it with a little bit of cream and like 2 Splendas.
Okay.
A little sweet.
A little bit of sweet. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, I have one more. That's an either or question.
but I forgot and I didn't write it down. I'm the worst about writing things down. Do you keep lists? Are you a list person?
No, I mean, yes, sometimes it depends on if I'm feeling organized. If I feel like I've got my stuff together, but most of the times it's all like locked up here, which, doesn't make things easier for other people because I can't read my mind. But
I know that thought process. I know that very, very well. I am a list person though. I live by a list because otherwise, do you get interrupted a lot? I bet you do.
I do get interrupted a lot. I think I have probably undiagnosed ADHD or something like that, because I go from thing to thing to thing. It's like the whole like squirrel, like,
yes.
I'm over here and I'm over here and I'm over here. But a lot of creatives that I've talked to are the same way. And I do have some lists that I have. So like, my work schedule stuff is all listed, but like other things, it's kind of like, oh, well, I do have journals. I journal a lot. And I have lots of things that I'll just write down in the journals. But then again, they're not all in the same place ever at the same time. So
yes. Yeah. So for me, I think I've finally reached a point in life that there's just too much in my head and I can't fit anything else.
I was trying to tell my kids that. I'm like, you guys have so much space in your heads because you haven't experienced life yet, that I have to have like certain things. My phone is my saving grace. I do the Hey Siri thing like all the time with remind me so I guess, that is a list. Yeah. I have reminders. Yeah. Yes. So I do that.
Yeah, I have. So that's what I always have a list, and usually I make my list of my questions before we sit down, but I forgot to grab that list. So I forgot the last one. But the other question that I do ask though, it's not an either or, it's a little more thoughtful. If you had to go back in time to any given time in the past, where would you go and when would you go?
Oh man. Anytime. I would probably say I'd probably go back to the Renaissance, when everything was like, coming out of like the Dark Ages and then like the Age of Enlightenment, and just to see like, I love the classic art. So like Da Vinci, like seeing the sculptures being made and the beautiful paintings and like all the cool advances in technology, old technology.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing that. So I would have to have like penicillin with me, because I'm sure I would die for some kind of like disease. But no, I would love to go way back, like Renaissance era, and just experience that, because they were so like, you hear about Renaissance men, they're adept in the arts and sciences and language and everything. So like the knowledge people had back then. Yeah. And I don't think a lot of that's lost now. Yeah. Where people were more specialists as opposed to being well-rounded. So I think back then it would be cool to just kind of be a fly on the wall and see things. Yeah.
That'd be a really cool that would be neat. That's the first time I've gotten that answer too. I love it. That's always the fun part. But again, thank you so much for joining me. This has been fun.
Thank you for having me
here. I'm going to put all your links in the show notes so you guys can go find all of her stuff in the description. Do you have a list of do you have like a retailer list yet? I don't know if you've been doing.
I just recently transferred my website over to a new provider. So I do have a list of retailers that are on there. I think I have to update it. I try to update it quarterly, because I'm always getting new people in, and some older ones go out, because everything has a cycle.
Right. Everything.
So yeah, I do have a list of retailers on my website.
Awesome. So that way you guys, if wherever you are, if you can get to Kami, great. If not, then you can look at that and see if there's somewhere that you can go see her work in person. But your pictures are great, so they can find you on social media and see what you're up to. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks for having me, Danielle. It was a pleasure. Lots of fun.
For more behind the scenes from all of our podcast guests, join us on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. on the Makers Chat podcast Facebook page, where we have been having Makers Create live. You'll get the opportunity to get just a little bit more from the different creatives that are joining us on the podcast, and see a little bit more about what it is that they do in person on the screen, and ask questions and really participate. It's been a lot of fun, and we hope to see you there. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for joining us. Remember to check out the Makers Chat community so that you can dive deeper into the conversation. You'll find the link to join in our show notes. Have a beautiful week, and we will chat again soon.